Is it winnable? I mean, that's like a debate in the Nazi general staff after Stalingrad. You know, did Hitler make a mistake in opening a two-front war? You know, should we have knocked out England first? I mean, that's the kind of debate that takes place here now, decades after the Vietnam War. Try to find, check and see, you know, history book, press, journals, a debate over whether it was simply a monstrous crime, the kind of crime for which Nazis were hanged at Nuremberg. Go on. I mean, and same today. I mean, take, say, Obama. He's considered a principled opponent of the Iraq War. You know, a lot of praise. What was his criticism? His criticism was that it was a strategic blunder, like Nazi generals after Stalingrad, or what you could read in Pravda in 1985, when a lot of people were saying openly it was a strategic blunder to invade Afghanistan. We don't call that principled critique when others do it. I mean, we call it criminal. But to try to look at ourselves is extremely hard. I mean, not just in the United States, almost anywhere. Your own history is whitewashed consistently. I mean, we even do it in personal life, if we're honest. It's pretty hard to look in the mirror, you know, but it's crucial if you want to understand the world. And it's crucial for the entire world in our case, because the U.S. is so powerful.
You don't want to answer my second question?
Pardon?
You don't want to answer my second question?
Sure.
What's your happiest moment in life?
Happy? No, that one, as I said, I'm not going to answer.
You can just say like clam chowder or something. That's fine.
Pardon?
You just can say clam chowder.
No, a lot happier than that.
Hello. Thank you again for coming to speak to us today. It was very informative. In your talk, you discussed the importance of the Geneva Conventions today in setting an appropriate standard and code of conduct and behavior in international affairs, and especially in times of conflict. You used the Geneva Conventions and then you applied it to Israel, especially in their last Gaza war and some of the actions that Israel's done in the past. I wanted to ask your opinion. Do you think that these same conventions and standards should be applied to Hamas, even though they are a non-state actor and don't have conventional military forces? And also, do you think the Geneva Conventions need to be adapted today for the question of asymmetric warfare?
Well, on the second, I don't see any reason whatsoever why the Geneva Conventions should be modified for what we call asymmetric warfare. Asymmetric warfare refers to our invasions of other countries and resistance to the invasions by people who are weaker. We didn't call it asymmetric warfare when we were supporting radical Islamists to try to drive the Russians out of Afghanistan. Okay? We didn't call the partisans in Europe asymmetric warfare when they were fighting the Nazis. Asymmetric warfare means when somebody tries to defend themselves against us or our clients. And there's no reason now why the Geneva Conventions have to be changed for that any more than there were when the Nazis killed the partisans. You know. So the second question, no. As far as Hamas is concerned, Hamas is a political party. Okay? And you can't really apply international law to a political party. You can say that actions of a political party are criminal, right? And some of Hamas's actions are criminal. So sure, if for example, take, say, the Amnesty International report I mentioned, it didn't just say we should stop supplying arms to Israel. It said we should stop applying arms to Israel and Hamas. Well, we don't supply arms to Hamas, but if we were doing it, we should stop. Okay? So sure, same standards should apply, but it's just, you know, it's so fantastically disproportionate that it's almost meaningless to raise the question. I mean, if Hamas, for example, says we'll never recognize Israel, okay, there's a political party has a right to say that. I mean, if a political party in Mexico says I'm never going to recognize the United States, which sits on half of Mexico, obtained by conquest, that's a legitimate position. The ruling party in Israel, Likud, happens to have as its platform, you can pick it up on the internet, its official platform is there cannot be a Palestinian state anywhere in what they call the land of Israel, Jordan to the sea. Okay, it's kind of like Hamas's program plan. Nobody talks about it because they're our ally and client, so they can say whatever they want. And they're not only talking about it, they're doing it. But sure, if Hamas fires rockets at Sderot, we should stop helping them do that. And in fact, we should take actions to prevent them from doing it. And we know what the actions are. Accept the ceasefire. When the U.S. and Israel did accept the ceasefire, the rockets stopped. And that's officially conceded. You can read it on the Israeli government website, official website. So sure, we should take actions to prevent criminal acts by sub-state actors.
All right, thank you very much.
Sorry?
I know. My name is David Targan. I'm one of the deans here. And I wanted to answer the question that some students had about what we can do about the various political situations that we're hearing about. And actually, the answer to that question lies right here in this room. 18 years ago, the East Timor Action Network established its kind of core here at an event that took place in Solomon 101 when Alan Nairn, a journalist, and Amy Goodman, another journalist, had come here to talk about a recent massacre in East Timor, one of the last massacres, one of the most recent massacres that was part of an ongoing series of massacres that had killed roughly 1/3 of the population of East Timor, and Noam, you've written about that quite a bit. People here actually, it only took a few hundred people. There's only 400 or 500 people in this room. Got together and figured out strategically who to talk to, who to write to within Congress to end military aid to Indonesia. And that was actually the very first step, the very first action by the United States to its ally, Indonesia, to say that we really disapprove of what you're doing in killing innocent Timorese people. And it was the beginning and the end of the occupation and killing in East Timor. Right now, unfortunately, we're back. Yeah, I will. Right now, we're back in a similar situation, and that is that we're about to resume military aid to Indonesia, and I was wondering what your thoughts about that were and what we could do about that at this point in history.
Yeah, actually, the forming ETAN, the East Timor Action Network, was quite an important action. The Indonesian invasion of East Timor began in 1975 with strong U.S. support all the way through. Also support of Britain, France, and others. Indonesia's a rich country, it's advantageous to be friendly to them. And as you said, it killed, maybe the worst act of genocide in the late 20th century, or one of the worst. All completely with U.S. support. Opposition actually began in 75, but it was minuscule. Talked to two people about it. It did build up, and after the Dili massacre, the one you're talking about, when Alan Nairn and Amy Goodman were attacked by Indonesian forces, it did get some publicity, and ETAN was formed, and that was extremely important. And remember, that was 1991, and the killing went on for another 8 years. The Clinton administration strongly supported Suharto. He was our kind of guy. The Clinton administration said right through 1999, atrocities and massacres continued. It's particularly striking because this was the same year that there was a lot of agonizing about the Serbian atrocities in Kosovo, which were nowhere near as severe as what was going on in East Timor. And of course, the background didn't even come close. Finally, there was a major massacre in August 1999, and at that point, international protest and domestic protest, which by then had built up, and ETAN had a lot to do with this, international protest against Clinton was so strong that he took a very simple step. He told the Indonesian army it's over. Literally. They had sworn they're never going to depart. This is our province, we're never going to leave. As soon as they got, a word from the master saying, game's over, they immediately withdrew. Okay, that tells you something. That tells you for the preceding 25 years, the United States could have stopped it, with a flick of a wrist. You didn't have to bomb Jakarta, you didn't need sanctions, didn't need anything. Just stop supporting it. And it's over. It's kind of a little like what happened with South Africa. And it could happen in this case too.
Just to follow up, what could students do?
What can we do now? Well, we've got to protest about it. Actually, Alan Nairn, who's pretty much living in Indonesia now and taking very dangerous steps. Alan, who's a fantastic person, is now challenging the Indonesian army to arrest him in Indonesia. He's publicly charging them with atrocities that he's exposed. And it's not a trivial thing to do in Indonesia. Not a nice place. So he's protesting it quite openly. He's insisting on being allowed to appear on television to denounce them, do something about it. And he's calling, of course, for an end to military aid to them. And Itan is too. So sure, we can join those efforts and support him. He's still facing serious danger.
Thank you so much once again for coming today, Professor Chomsky. And as a member of Brown Students for Justice in Palestine, we would really like to thank you for your message of support. But my question relates towards the nuclear weapons, particularly the American facilitation of both the expansion of weapons programs in Israel, Pakistan, and India, which all seem to be rather schizophrenic given their complicated histories, not only among India and Pakistan, but particularly among Pakistan and Israel, and India's vacillating relationship with Israel. So I was hoping you could comment on that.
On the Israel-India relationship?
On just all three and the ways
all
in which
three.
It seems, and the second, I guess, equally schizophrenic policy of the U.S. supporting really just brutal regimes, particularly the Saudi and like Arab monarchs and the Egyptian government who in no way respect human rights, and how that facilitates American policy within the Middle East and how that relates to Israel.
It's pretty straight. I mean, let's take Egypt, one of the worst dictatorships in the region, very harsh, brutal dictatorship. You all read about Obama's trip to Cairo, and how he was praised, for opening his heart to the Muslim world. Everything's going to be different, we love you, and so on. What didn't get much play, maybe almost nothing, is a press conference where he was asked on his way to Egypt, what are you going to say about Egypt's, as they put it, authoritarian regime? I mean, authoritarian is quite an understatement. But what are you going to say about Egypt's authoritarian regime? Well, take a look at Obama's answer. He said, I don't like to use labels for folks. When a politician pronounces the word folks, you just get ready for the next series of lies that's coming out. Otherwise, you talk about people. But if you're referred to folks, so the next thing that came out is he's a good man, Mubarak. He's running a stable society, and he's our friend. So I'm not going to criticize anything. Okay. What do you think Egyptians or anybody in the Middle East how seriously can they take his comments about human rights violations in Iran? How seriously should we take them? And Saudi Arabia is even worse, So what does this do for us? I mean, these are loyal clients. The Middle East energy reserves are one of the most important issues in the world. You go back to the 1940s, high-level U.S. planners were talking about how, this is what they called a stupendous source of strategic power. I mean, one of the greatest material prizes in world history. If we can control that region, we can control the world, and so on. And that hasn't changed. That's why the U.S. has a massive intervention in the Middle East all the way through, replacing Britain, which used to be in the forefront. Yes, so you support dictatorial regimes. I mean, it's very well understood. You recall George Bush's plaintive question, why do they hate us? And the answer, they hate our freedom and so on. I mean, the press was kind enough not to report, or commentators, that the same question had been asked by Eisenhower in 1958. He raised the question, why is there a campaign of hatred against us among the people of the Middle East? Not the governments, but among the people. And it was a little surprising in 1958 because that was right after the U.S. had intervened to kick Israel, England, and France out of Egypt, which they invaded. But still there was a campaign of hatred. Well, the National Security Council released, highest planning body, released a study of it and said it's true that they said there's a perception in the Middle East that the United States supports harsh and dictatorial regimes and blocks democracy and development, and we do it because we want to gain control over their resources. And it went on to say, well, perception is more or less accurate, and that's what we should do. Okay, so they don't hate us because they hate our freedoms. They hate us because they want their freedoms. And they understand that the U.S. supports dictatorial, oppressive regimes, blocks democracy and development, and we do it because that's the way we control things. And it's the same today. Actually, after Bush's rather ignorant question, the Defense Science Board, one of the main advisory panels of the Pentagon, it came out with a study, why do they hate us study, and they said, it's not our freedoms, it's our policies. They hate our policies for good reasons, as long as so why do we continue the policies when we know it's going to lead to hatred? It's because we're trusting the dictatorships to hold down their populations. Just as we're trusting Keith Dayton's army to keep control of the Palestinians so they'll be a legitimate partner for Israel. I mean, that's our policy, not only there, but all over the world. And we didn't invent it. The British did the same, the French did the same, and so on. Those are imperial policies. If we're in favor of them, okay, let's be honest about it at least, and not pretend we're some kind of a messianic Wilsonian state. We're not.
The three countries with nuclear weapons.
Oh, the three countries with
nuclear
weapons. Well,
even
Pakistan developed nuclear weapons during the Reagan years, and the Reagan administration pretended it didn't know. Of course, they knew. The reason is they were supporting Zia-ul-Haq, who's absolutely the worst and most atrocious of the many military dictators that Pakistan had. Zia-ul-Haq was also carrying out radical Islamization of Pakistan, with Saudi support. Most of the kind of intellectual roots of terror go right back to Saudi Arabia. And they were giving plenty of money. So they were providing lots of funding for developing, madrasas, actually means schools, but special religious schools where the children are trained just in extremist, all they do is read the Quran and, learn about extremist versions of Islam, the Saudi versions. And Reagan was supporting that. So we supported, part of his legacy is, Al-Qaeda style terrorism. Another part is Pakistani nuclear weapons. And the reason for it was, the Reagan administration was, and also the Democrats were very excited about Afghanistan. They were gathering up the most extreme radical Islamist fanatics they could find anywhere in the world, and sending them to Afghanistan and arming them with advanced weapons and so on. The goal was not to liberate Afghanistan. In fact, the head of the CIA station in Islamabad, Pakistan, who was running the operation, was very straight about it. He said, we don't care one way or another about Afghanistan. The point is to kill Russians. And he said, that's a noble goal, and that's what we want to do. When they got that goal, they left Pakistan in the hands of US-backed warlords who were so vicious that when the Taliban came, they were welcomed. So that's Pakistan. India, actually the US, as long as India was either neutralist or had pretty good relations with the Russians, the US was opposed to their developing nuclear weapons and imposed sanctions. But by the last 10 years or so, India has been drifting towards a closer alliance with Israel and the United States. So, and part of that context is, well, they can have nuclear weapons if they like, and we'll support it. The treaty that granted India the right to develop nuclear weapons with our support has a somewhat broader context. For one thing, it was sold here straight out as for commercial advantage. That opens up India to arms sales from the United States, sales of nuclear technology and so on, like a big market and growing country. But also it has to do with Iran. I mean, a centerpiece of US policy is to isolate Iran. Now, India is energy short, and the obvious way for them to get energy is with a pipeline from Iran, an Iran, Pakistan, India pipeline, because Iran is rich in energy. But the US doesn't want that. It wants them not to get Iranian energy. Part of the way to talk them out of it was to give them support with developing nuclear energy, which meant freeing up nuclear weapons development. And actually the invasion of Afghanistan has to do with that too. I mean, in the background of the invasion of Afghanistan, this goes back 20 years, is the idea of setting up a pipeline from Turkmenistan, Central Asia, which is very rich in natural gas, one of the biggest in the world, a pipeline from there to India, which would run through Afghanistan. In fact, it would run through Kandahar, the place that they're now planning to attack. And that pipeline, if it could be established, would have two functions. For one thing, it would undermine efforts to establish Iran-India relations, and it would also undermine Russia's efforts to maintain control of its former, parts of what used to be the Soviet Union. That's a kind of a background consideration for the invasion of Afghanistan. Nobody knows just how significant it is. But in that context, it's understandable, can't approve of it, but it's understandable why the US government, both Republicans and Democrats, would agree to support India's violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and develop nuclear weapons. As far as Israel's concerned, that goes back to the Nixon administration. The Nixon administration made a deal with Israel that, if you're interested in the details, the main book about it is by an Israeli analyst, Avner Cohen. It's in English. But what he reports is that, it's not on paper, but it's assumed that Nixon and Prime Minister Golda Meir just made a deal that the US would permit Israel to maintain its policy of silence, not admitting that it has nuclear weapons and not denying it, and that the US would not interfere with that. And Obama reiterated that after the International Atomic Energy Agency called on Israel to open up its facilities. So yeah, it's a client state, it's a valued US ally, so if they want to have nuclear weapons, okay.
You started addressing the question, but you've been talking extensively about what international laws we've violated and how we violated them. But maybe what I would like you to elaborate a little bit on is why we violated them. And as a follow-up to that is, what concern to local populations / international law we should give in our quest to global domination and our accessing local natural resources?
Well, look, I'm supposed some unbelievably powerful country, from Mars, decided to take over U.S. agricultural and mineral resources because they wanted them. I suppose they were powerful enough to do it. What would we say they should do? Well, we know what we would say they should do. Okay, same when we carry out what's literally called protecting our resources. So you go back to top US planners, George Kennan and the rest. We say we have to use force to protect our resources, which happen to be in other countries, but that's kind of like an accident of history. Clinton, for example, his official doctrine, which was worse than Bush's, but it was quiet, so nobody made a fuss about it. But the official doctrine was that the US maintains the right to use force to ensure our control over markets and resources elsewhere. Okay? That's our commitment. Should we do that? Should any other country do that? I mean, did we support Saddam Hussein when he invaded Kuwait? Why not? I mean, he was trying to take control of their resources, which he actually had a claim on. You know, there's a serious Iraqi claim to Kuwait, which was sort of stolen from Iraq by the British to block Iraqi access to the sea when they established. But did we say, okay, that's fine, you can protect you can take your resources by invading Kuwait? I mean, we have a principle about this, and we apply it to everyone except ourselves or our clients. Okay, should we do that? Well, you know, it depends whether you like to live in a criminal state, in a criminal society. As far as why we violate international law, the answer is pretty straightforward, because we can get away with it. There's nobody else in the world who's going to do anything about it. And as long as the American population is passive and obedient, nobody will do anything about it here. I mean, take, say, the World Court case that I mentioned. To repeat, the U.S. is the only country now, having lost the companionship of Albania and Libya, the only country that has violated a World Court decision. Take a careful look at that World Court decision. It's very illuminating. The court, Nicaragua brought a case to the World Court run by a very distinguished international lawyer, Harvard law professor. The World Court threw out most of the case, almost the entire case, and just drew a decision on very narrow grounds, bilateral Nicaraguan-U.S. treaty. Why'd they throw out the case? Because the World Court's rules require that it cannot adjudicate a conflict unless both parties agree to the jurisdiction. Now, when the U.S. accepted World Court jurisdiction in 1946, okay, it added a reservation saying that the U.S. is immune to any case that relies on international law, meaning anything involving the UN Charter or the Charter of the Organization of American States. The U.S. is immune to anything brought up under those conditions, meaning the U.S., this is 1946, when it was pretty much running the world, essentially said, look, we do not accept jurisdiction. We do not accept the application of international law to ourselves. So, and the World Court, you know, accepted that. That's the way its rules work. And it even goes on. I mean, a couple of years ago, I forget, early 2000s, Yugoslavia brought a case to the World Court about the NATO bombing of Serbia. Okay, one of the charges in the indictment, the petition that they brought to the court, was on genocide. Well, the U.S. withdrew from the court proceedings on the valid grounds that when the U.S. signed the Genocide Convention after 40 years, it added a reservation saying it doesn't apply to us. Okay, so we're free to commit genocide. Well, okay, we're free to commit genocide. We're free to violate the UN Charter or any other international treaty because we say so. Okay? And we can say so. First of all, practically nobody knows it. You know, you have to be kind of like a specialist in the topic to know it. I mean, if we cared about our freedom, you'd teach this kind of thing in elementary school. But almost nobody knows it except a few specialists. And it's, if it's brought up, it would be considered perfectly legitimate. I mean, take, say, the International Criminal Court. When the International Criminal Court was established a couple of years ago, it was not permitted to include the crime of aggression, the most serious crime of all, because the U.S. wouldn't tolerate that. We don't want charges of aggression to be floating around because we do too much of it. So that was knocked off. Then even after that, the U.S. refused to accept the jurisdiction of the court. Now the public wants to. I mean, the public is strongly in favor of accepting international jurisdiction, but elites are not. So the U.S. rejected the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. And in fact, a couple of years ago, Congress passed a law, which the president signed, which in Europe is sometimes called the Netherlands Invasion Act, The law authorizes the President of the United States to invade Holland if any American is brought to The Hague, to the International Court, to rescue them. I mean, can anybody else even say that? Okay. If you're a big enough bully and you have an obedient population, you can do what you like.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hi. I was thinking, you talked earlier on that the USA and Israel work hand in hand together, committing war crimes and breaking international laws. And I know that the USA gives over $1 billion to Israel annually, and we as US citizens, we recently just did our taxes, and I couldn't help but think, wow, some of my tax money is going to go to Israel to help kill my family and friends in Palestine. And then as Americans, we go and try to enter Palestine/Israel, and we were given denied entry. And our American citizenship are stripped away from us, and they give us no reason why. Like, they give no explanations, denied entry, and that's about it.
Who are you referring to?
I guess a lot of my friends and families who are not necessarily Palestinian Americans, but also Asian Americans and
are just
African
not
Americans.
not allowed entry, you mean?
Yeah, are given denied entry, but are given no explanations.
That's the least of it. Yeah, that's actually there are a few Jews who are not allowed entry, like Richard Falk, the UN rapporteur for Gaza, or Norman Finkelstein, maybe others, Americans, who happen to be Jewish. But sure, that's bad. But that doesn't begin to compare with the crimes that are being committed in the occupied territories. And certainly, when American citizens pay taxes, not only are they helping fund Israel, but though they don't know it, they're funding an organization which is committed by law in Israel to work for only for the benefit of people. I'm quoting of Jewish race, religion, and origin. And that organization is not a small one. It happens to control about 90% of the land in Israel. And Americans are contributing to that because that organization has tax-free status. It's called the Jewish National Fund. I mean, would you want to contribute to an organization that is bound by law to, say in the United States, to control 90% of the land for the benefit of people of white religion, race, and origin or something? I mean, that's kept very quiet because if Americans knew anything about this, they wouldn't like it. So, okay, that's the task of people who care about the world. Let people know.